All right, guys. We'll open up for any questions you have for me.
If you have a question for Coach Campbell, please use the raise hand button in your participant panel and we'll get you going. Our first question this week will be from Sam Kahn Jr. of ESPN.com. Sam, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, Matt. I'm curious, when you look at the trajectory of your guys the last few years, how important has stability at quarterback been to have the same guy grow and succeed in that role?
Yeah, I think number one, stability, period, in our program has really allowed us to have the ability to learn and grow together. And I would agree with you, the quarterback position, growing with us through this journey, has been, I think, a huge part of our growth process. I think I said maybe at the beginning of this year, we've grown as a program as Brock has grown. And, I really, I feel like a lot of the lessons that we've learned and a lot of the growth that we've learned and grown, it's been really enjoyable for all of us to be able to do it together. So I think that's been a key piece for us.
Our next question will be from John Schaefer of WOI. Go ahead, John.
Matt, how does this OU team differ this week versus the team you saw back on October 3rd?
Yeah, I just, again, a very young team when we played them early in the season. And I think a very young team that was extremely talented that has grown into, what you've seen from Oklahoma year after year, and that's a dynamic football team. And so, I think that's kind of year you're in where, even though we played each other early in the season, both two very different football teams, and a lot of that just with kind of the pandemic, number one, and number two, a lot of youth on both sides of the ball that have grown as the season's grown.
Our next question will be from Travis Hines of the Ames Tribune. Go ahead, Travis.
Matt, you've talked a lot about evaluating game performances, sometimes, independent of the result and taking, a week-to-week view. And I'm just curious how much that was tested early in the season after that loss to Louisiana for your guys. Whereas, much as they've adopted that mindset, that could have been, a challenge or temptation to let a little bit of doubt creep in. I'm just curious what you saw from them then.
Yeah, I think, again, for me, we've talked a lot in our program that sometimes you gotta recruit, and you gotta have coaches in your program, not that you can win with, but that you can lose with, and not lose the integrity of who you are and what you're about. And again, I think our sport is one of those sports where, again, you're going to have successes and you're going to have failures. And the key to growth is, can you learn from your failures? So I think, even in a year like this, I felt really, really confident about our football team and our football program. And again, I think my approach, or everybody in our program's approach, was for the long haul, not for the immediate short term, as we came back in terms of getting our football team back. And, I think in some ways that approach has been a positive for us because of the health and safety. And I guess all I mean by that is, you could have, there's certainly, you maybe cheated the process and tried to bend your best right away. And maybe that would have faltered your team and the health of your team down the stretch. But, I think our kids understood the long-term vision of what we're about and what our team wants to become. And, I think the senior leadership certainly allowed that one loss early in the season to be obviously a great springboard and learning opportunity rather than maybe a challenge to what our culture and what our program's about.
Was there a moment of validation after that game, whether in a meeting or on the practice, a moment of validation of your confidence that they would be able to learn from it and move on rather than, have it rattle them at all?
No, I really don't think there was one of those moments. I meet with our seniors, twice a week, and we had a meeting right after that, and I felt really good about where their mental mindset was, and even what did we learn from that game, and how do we continue to move ourselves forward where some areas that we've talked about in the past that maybe it challenged and kind of got to express some of my views. But, we do that after every game. So I felt I probably really confident even after that meeting that our mindset was in the right place.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question comes from Tommy Birch of the Des Moines Register. Go ahead, Tommy.
Hey, Matt, I was kind of wondering what kind of stage does Saturday's game kind of provide your guys to, I guess, showcase their skills for the next level?
I don't know. To me, it's the next game in a lot of ways, and the next level doesn't evaluate one game. The next level evaluates, every game. So, I don't know if that really has much say in terms of what the next level looks like.
Our next question comes from Scott Reister of KCCI. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi, Coach. I had two quick questions about Mount Union. First off, how much did you learn from your time there as a player and then later as an assistant coach? And what kind of influence has what you learned and picked up there had on your ability to build that championship culture at Iowa State?
For me, I think my collegiate experience has saved my life probably in a lot of ways more than it had to do with anything in terms of football. And, the coaching staff there, the people there, obviously some of the teammates there, it was about relationship and trust and culture. And, had I not had that experience and probably at that point in time in my life, certainly, would not have had the opportunity to become probably a football coach and, certainly have a great foundation to reflect on in terms of what it felt like to be in that program and what it meant to be and go to work, go to football every day in that program. So, like I said, I think it saved my life in a lot of ways, and it had certainly a profound impact on the direction of my life going forward after college.
Coach Karras told me there was a moment at halftime of a game when you were a player, and he had a scoring system where you would get 5 points for a sack, but he'd instructed you to not try to sack the quarterback because he wanted to contain the quarterback, and you challenged him at halftime. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I don't know if I challenged him. I think it was more so the head coach challenged the student at the time. So I don't know if the challenge was so much from the student as it was from the mentor, and it was duly noted. So I think I picked up on his message real fast.
But you didn't want to. I mean, was it hard for you to not want to try to sack him?
Yeah, when you play defensive end, and sometimes I have to reiterate this message to some of our guys. But obviously, you want to do what's best, and I think great lesson for me is you do what's best for the team, and I think that was probably the teachable moment for a young Matt Campbell at the time, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question comes from Jenny Carlson of the Oklahoman. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hey, Matt, I'm sitting here watching it snow. I think it's happening in honor of this game on Saturday. We don't have much snow in Oklahoma.
Well, I'm glad you're getting a little bit.
Well, it's pretty nice. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Charlie Kolar, obviously a local guy here from Norman. If I did my math correct, he was in the very first group you would have recruited from kind of start to finish, I guess. Yeah. What was the importance of getting him? How did you feel like he could assist what you guys wanted to build there in Hayden?
Yeah, I think what I really enjoyed, and you're right, it was the first really full class that you had an entire year to recruit, and getting to meet Charlie. More importantly, probably for me, was getting to meet Charlie's family. I can vividly remember his mother and Charlie coming up on a visit to our campus in the summer. One of my great experiences was going to watch Charlie and with his family play in the state championship game his senior year. And to me, I think that was the thing that I always really admired most about Charlie. Yes, I love that he was a athletic football player and certainly played multiple sports and, was very competitive in everything he did. He was a great student, but I think the most important thing to me was who he was around his family, what kind of brother he was, what kind of son he was, I think the respect that he had for his mother and father during the recruiting process, I think his aspirations to be an engineer, all those things were really impressive about Charlie. And I think when you get to know Charlie, he is the elite competitor. I mean, he's a guy that's gotten one A minus in our engineering school during his time here at Iowa State. He's a guy that is always finding every way to become the best version of himself he can be. And I think you saw a lot of those things, but equally you saw this respect factor for his family and how he treated the people around him, and that really impressed me about Charlie. And I felt like as our program grew, continuing to get the right people in our culture and our program was way more important than anything else.
The program's obviously grown as he's been there. I'm curious, though, as you've watched him, how have you seen his evolution? I mean, you knew him as that green freshman coming in. How is he different now than he was those early days there in Ames?
Yeah, I think the biggest word for Charlie is probably, as competitive as he is, I think it's confidence. And I think Charlie knows that he's a really good player and wanted to be a really good player, but I think his growth has become, in the detail, in his strength, in terms of, his route running, his confidence that I think not only can I do this, but I can be really good at doing this. And I think that's probably grown the most during his time with us, and it has been a great joy to watch his career progress really in every facet.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep, thank you.
Our next question comes from Michael Swain of Cyclone Alert and 247 Sports. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, Coach. Obviously, Oklahoma didn't have Ronnie Perkins the first time you guys matched up. I'm just curious, how has he maybe elevated the quality of play from that Oklahoma defensive line in the games that he's been back?
Well, Ronnie's a veteran, and he's an outstanding football player, and I think any time that you gain a veteran in this kind of season, where guys that played, guys that impact games, that experience is really probably shown more this year than any other season. That can be a real tribute, and I think that has certainly helped that defense. I said this also, though, about the defense, is there's a lot of youth on that defense, especially the defensive front. And I think that group has just gotten better and better and better and more confident just as the season goes. And, you're really looking at a dynamic defense that's playing outstanding right now. And, obviously getting a guy like Ronnie back that is, you can see, a vocal, emotional leader, as well as a really good football player. Those had to be huge positives for that football team and that program.
And then looking at the relationship between Brock and Brees, how have you seen them maybe grow over the course of the season? And then what have they just meant for your program as a whole this season?
Yeah, I think the relationship between those two, I think, has always been really good. I think the smartest thing I said this that Brees Hall ever did was, become roommates with Brock Purdy and Mike Rose, and I think that probably, help, a young, very talented player see two veteran football players how they go about their business day in and day out. And I think equally, I think Brees's ability to put a smile on your face, his really relaxed demeanor, I think equally has made a huge impact on that house as well. So it's been fun to watch how those two have had impacts, or those three have impacted each other. I think all in a really positive way. And we're really fortunate because we are really good players here, stand for everything that's right about what our football program wants to be and continue to strive to be. And their character, how they go about their business, how they practice every day, how they take care of their body, all the little things that it takes to be successful. Our good players do that, and certainly tribute to those two guys as well.
And then last question from me. Obviously, National Signing Day is tomorrow. I'm just curious, how does having signing day in the middle of a huge game prep week, how does that change how you either approach the week or your schedule for the week?
Yeah, it doesn't really change us much. Again, I think a lot of us and a lot of what we've done is those relationships have been built for a long haul. It's not a short-term relationship, so I think those are things where you could just continue about your business and feel really fortunate that you've been able to develop great relationships and great bonds with a lot of these young people and their families, and really excited, obviously, for them for tomorrow and obviously our program for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Ben Visser of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Go ahead, Ben.
Hey, Coach. You talked all season about putting aside your ego, you, your coaching staff, your whole team pretty much, and kind of going back to the drawing board and figuring out what wasn't working. We talked with Coach Haycock and Coach Manning last week, and Coach Haycock was saying that after the bowl game in January, you guys as a coaching staff all met and you devised a plan, I guess, of what you guys needed to do to take that next step. What was that whole process like?
Yeah, for me, it really started with our kids, and it really occurred after the Kansas State game a year ago. I just felt like we had learned a lot. We maybe weren't exactly where we wanted to be, and what were some of those things that, number one, that our kids felt that we were doing well or not doing well. And then, took those same questions to our coaching staff and, then put a lot of time to just continue to realign ourselves. And, it's not greatly different from every other football season because it's something that we try to do a great job of every year, reflect, understand what we did well, what we didn't do well, and how do you move ourselves forward. And, probably, learned a lot of really good things from our kids and, had a phenomenal conversation amongst our coaching staff. And, again, I would say probably my growth as a coach is to make sure that those conversations were heard and those conversations were had in a really meaningful way. Not to say we didn't do a good job of that before, but just felt that was really important for all of us to continue to move ourselves forward and continue our growth process.
What were some of the things that some of your players brought up in those meetings?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is stuff that I would probably keep more in-house just because I think those are things that, those are intimate things, but I would say that what was really strong is our kids had a really strong, unified opinion of some of the positives that were going on and some of the things that we needed to continue to grow in. And, I'm really glad that the most important people in our program have a voice in our program, and that's our student athletes. And, I think they really allow us to figure out how do we devise the best plan to serve them and guide them. And, without their input and without their leadership, we certainly wouldn't have had the ability to make some of the right decisions and maybe some of the right changes and tweaks that we were able to make in this offseason.
And then last thing for me, Coach Haycock, he said this. He kind of compared the change that you guys went through to him changing defenses a few years back. You just kind of have to throw out everything you know, and the change isn't the hard part. The trust is the hard part. And when we saw the defense, you took out a defensive lineman, so we could see that change. But it's harder to see this change, I think, because, obviously the results are there, 8-1 in the Big 12. But what are some tangible things that maybe we can't see, but that have changed and that are there?
Yeah, again, I don't think there was this this wholesale philosophical change in our program. I think the biggest thing, again, and I would say this, and I think it took quarantine a little bit and took this pandemic, even for myself, to really sit back. And I think there's some things I've always challenged of, how do you be your best when your best is needed? And, I think sometimes we get stuck in a rut in football, especially, that you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again. And you're almost fearful to make changes, hard changes, because you see some success of what you've done. And yet, I think in some ways, you at least myself, and I know our staff, and I know our leadership of our players, you're always trying to find, is there a better way to do it? And, I think just in terms of even how you practice, how we train, some of the meeting schedule, like all the little things that serve our players so they can be their best and they can have the absolute best experience that they possibly can have. That's my mission. It's been my mission from day one. And, I think finding those and having enough, like I said, check your ego at the door and have enough courage. And I think coach is right. Like, you have to have courage to make those decisions. And maybe had we not had some time to really reflect, maybe we wouldn't have made those decisions. But I'm certainly glad we have. And, I think that holistically, a lot of those things have helped guide us for sure.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Our next question will be from Randy Peterson of the Des Moines Register. Go ahead, Randy.
Matt, Heisman Trophy ballots went out this week, and we're supposed to send them back sometime. I don't know, I forget when, but sometime real soon. What would be, if a Heisman Trophy voter asked you about Freesall, what would you say?
Yeah, I think, Randy, when you look at stuff like that and awards like that, I think the reality of things of that magnitude are just like somebody asked me about what would the game mean for the next level. Well, those are all, you got to look at the whole product. You got to look at the whole season. Like, what's the videotape evidence say? And I think what I would say is go watch the video and then make the best decision for you. And, I think what you would say even about that question with Brees is, boy, there's some really good videotape evidence that he's one of the best football players right now in college football. And so, where is he? How does he stack? There's a lot of great college football players, and there's a lot of great teams. So, I think that you got to look at the video, you got to evaluate it, and got to make the best decision.
Thanks, Matt. I got one more thing. When was it? 2018, when they had the Big 12 Media Days at AT&T, I think, whatever it was.
Yep.
But I remember you were standing out somewhat in the middle of the field before it started. You're standing next to Jaquan, and you're pointing up around at the stadium to him. Did you ever? And I didn't even ask what you guys were talking about. That was a private moment. But 2 years later, you're there again. Did you think it could happen that quick?
Yeah, and again, Randy, I would answer that with, I don't know. We've always known what results that we would love to have in our program, but we've always worried about how do we better the process and how do we better our day-to-day aspirations to becoming the best version of us. And so, you asked that, and I know I'm giving you an answer that probably you don't want, but I don't know if it's ever been about that. It's been about how do we become the best version of us, and knowing that the best version of us, as we continue to learn, is good enough. And so, I think that there's been a lot of growth in really just that, more than worrying about where is the end result. Can we really strain, finish, and become the best version of us through the entirety of a season? And I think that's been our number one focus.
What do you think? Oh, okay, sorry guys. What do you figure you and Jaquan were talking about? I'll ask now, and maybe you don't even remember it. I don't know.
Well, with Jaquan, Randy, you just never know. You know what I mean? So, like, I'd hate to even imagine what that conversation could have been like.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Our next question comes from Jared Stansberry of Cyclone Fanatic. Go ahead, Jared.
Hey, Coach. A little bit different question for you here. Your guys have talked a lot about how much fun they're having this season just playing the game. And I don't know that there's any better example or way to personify that, I guess, than when they've done the swag surfing thing at the end of the last couple games. Do you know how that started, and what would it take for them to get you to join in on their swag surfing?
Well, for me, it takes some rhythm, which I probably don't have very much of, so I would hate to embarrass anybody. But, I'm not quite sure where that started, but, you can tell that the kids really enjoy it, and they're really enjoying when it happens. So, for me, our kids work really hard, and, when they can enjoy something together as a team, I certainly don't mind that at all.
Our next question comes from Mark Freund of WHO. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Matt. Who on this team, around this program, et cetera, are we not giving enough praise or is not getting enough attention publicly for being a big factor in getting you guys where you are right now?
Yeah, I guess I would have to know what's being said publicly to answer that question probably correctly. So, I think, again, a lot of us have put our head in the dirt, have really focused on ourselves. And, I just really think that continue to try to pound away at what's going on inside of here rather than maybe what's going on outside of here. And again, I don't mean to demean your question, but, I think that's something that, maybe after the season, as you can reflect on it, we might be able to find that answer. But, I think that the great thing that we have is it's about team. It's not about an individual. It's not about an offense or a defense. It's not about a coach. It's about all of us going in the same direction at the same time, really straining to try to become the best version of ourselves we can be. And I think that's been the beauty of what this team has had the ability to grow with and grow through as our seasons kind of continued forward.
Okay, fair enough. And then at the start of this, 20-some minutes ago, you mentioned that you felt that there was a lot of growth from Oklahoma as a whole. Is there one area that you can look at and say, okay, maybe this is where they've grown the most?
Oh, I think that game was so early that I think for us, finding out, just maybe what allows this team to be successful, what gives us the best chance week in and week out, what allows us to, what does a Sunday look like, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday. I think the whole process of becoming the best Iowa State football team has probably been the greatest growth that we've been able to make from early in the season, especially that Oklahoma game, to where we are right now. None of those things are easy, so doing that and continuing to grow in that is certainly a challenge and will continue to be a challenge for this team. But that's where I think the greatest growth that we've been able to make is to identify what allows us to be successful and then go to work every day to become the best version of us that we can be.
I'm sorry, I meant from Oklahoma. Is there an area in Oklahoma that you felt that they've grown the most from now to then?
Yeah, no, that's all right. From an Oklahoma standpoint, I would probably say the same thing, right? I think you saw a really young team that had elite talent, and you've seen that team really kind of grow from that game on. You've seen a talented young quarterback kind of come of age. You've seen the growth of their offensive line, and some of their young skill players start to really emerge as dynamic playmakers. Same thing on the defensive line, really talented football players and kind of really coming of age. So I think, again, you see a team that really has become the best version of themselves that they can be.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
Nope, that's all right.
Our next question comes from Matt Bellinson of the Iowa State Daily. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Matt, do you have any update on Dylan's status or possibly Trevor Downing for this week?
No, nothing new. I would say both guys are questionable for the game. Both guys really doing a great job in terms of their rehab. And, I think we're really positive of where both guys continue to get themselves. And, we hope to get them back, whether it be Saturday or as the season continues.
Thanks.
Our next question comes from Jet Beecham of KGAN. Jet, go ahead. All right, we don't seem to have him at the moment, so we'll come back to him later. Our next question will come from Sam Kahn of ESPN.com. Go ahead, Sam.
Matt, I've heard you say a number of times over the years in building this program that the margins for error were small within your program. I'm curious, as your talent level has increased, I would assume that you still have those high standards for details, but do you feel like the margins for error have increased as your talent level has increased on your roster?
No, I think, the reality, we are who we are. And yes, we've gotten um, maybe older and our talent has been able to develop. But I think to become the best version of ourselves, the best team that we can become, the difference is in the detail. The difference is in our ability to do the little things well. And, I think from my end, that has served us well at times, and at times we've had to be reminded, in some tough ways throughout this season of just how critical that difference in the detail really is in terms of not just winning and losing, but also becoming the best version of ourselves we can be.
All right, our next question comes from Jet Beecham of KGAN. Go ahead, Jet.
Awesome. Okay, we got it. Matt, this year has kind of been a season of firsts and a season of history with what you guys have been able to do, and it seems like it started with that game versus Oklahoma and getting that first win and getting over that hump at home. Looking back on that game, I mean, do you think that kind of gave your team proof that they could be as good as they needed to be and wanted to be?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us was getting back on the field and obviously going to play TCU on the road and coming off of that bye week after the first game and our ability to really take the humility of the first game, put our egos aside, figure out what we needed to do to grow and get better, and then go to work. And I think probably that was as defining of the character of our kids and our team and our program, probably as much as anything that we've been able to do this season in terms of where we were heading and what kind of team maybe we had the opportunity to become